The ambulance siren screamed through the cold night air as Keisha Washington dropped to her knees on the wet sidewalk outside Miller's diner. Her hands shook as she pressed them against the chest of the young white man in the expensive suit who had collapsed right in front of her. His lips were turning blue and his eyes were rolling back. She could feel his heart barely beating under her palms. This man was dying right here on this dirty street, and she was the only one who could save him. 28-year-old Keisha had seen death before when her own mother passed away in her arms 3 years ago, and she refused to let it happen again. Not tonight. Not on her watch. She screamed for someone to call 911 as she began chest compressions just like the free CPR class had taught her last month at the community center. Every push against his chest felt like she was fighting death itself. His expensive watch glinted under the streetlight, and his designer shoes were getting soaked in the puddle, but none of that mattered because a human life was slipping away. Keisha counted out loud as tears streamed down her face. 30 compressions. 2 breaths. 30 compressions. 2 breaths. She refused to stop even as her arms burned with pain. Marcus Chen was only 31 years old, but he had already built a tech empire worth $3 billion. He was the CEO of Chen Industries, and his face had been on the cover of every business magazine in America. But tonight none of that power or money could save him as his heart failed him on a random street corner in downtown Detroit. He had been working 18-hour days for 3 months straight, and his body had finally given up. The chest pains had started during his late dinner meeting, but he ignored them like he ignored everything that got in the way of his work. Now he was lying on cold concrete, dying while a complete stranger fought to keep him alive. Through the fog of unconsciousness, Marcus could hear a woman's voice calling out numbers and feel desperate hands pushing on his chest. The voice sounded scared but determined. It sounded like hope. Somewhere deep in his failing mind, Marcus heard that voice and held onto it like a lifeline. He did not know who this woman was, but her voice became his anchor to the world of the living. Keisha had been working double shifts at Miller's diner for 2 years, straight trying to pay off her mother's medical bills and support her 7-year-old daughter, Destiny. Every night her feet ached and her back screamed in pain, but she never complained because she had responsibilities. She was all that Destiny had in this world, and she would work herself to the bone to give her baby girl a better life. Tonight was supposed to be just another shift. She was carrying a bag of leftover food from the diner because her refrigerator at home was almost empty again. Rent was due in 3 days, and she was $40 short. Her car had broken down last week, and she could not afford to fix it, so she walked 2 miles to work and 2 miles home, every single day. Life was hard, but Keisha never let it break her spirit. Her grandmother had raised her to be strong and to always help people, no matter what. That's why when this man collapsed right in front of her, she did not hesitate for even 1 second. She dropped everything and ran to help because that is what good people do. The paramedics arrived after what felt like hours, but was only 6 minutes. They took over from Keisha, whose arms were shaking so badly she could barely stand. One paramedic looked at her with respect and said, "You saved his life." Those words hit Keisha like a thunderbolt. She had saved someone's life. Her hands were covered in dirt and water from the sidewalk, and her uniform was soaked, but she had actually saved a human being from death. The paramedics loaded the man onto a stretcher, and one of them asked her name. "Keisha Washington," she said quietly. The paramedic wrote it down and told her that the hospital would want to talk to her. She nodded, but she was already thinking about getting home to Destiny. Her neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, was watching her daughter, and Keisha did not want to impose for too long. As the ambulance drove away with its lights flashing, Keisha picked up her bag of leftover food and started the long walk home. She did not know the man's name or who he was. She just knew that tonight she had made a difference, and that thought kept her warm during the cold walk home. 3 days passed, and Keisha had almost forgotten about the incident. Life went on with its endless demands and struggles. She worked her morning shift and her evening shift and spent every moment in between with Destiny. Her daughter was the light of her life with her bright smile and curious questions about everything. Destiny wanted to be a doctor when she grew up, and Kaisha encouraged that dream, even though she had no idea how she would pay for college. Every night Kaisha helped Destiny with homework at their tiny kitchen table under the flickering light bulb. The apartment was small and the walls were thin, but it was home and Kaisha kept it clean and filled with love. On the third day after the incident, Kaisha was serving coffee to customers during the breakfast rush, when the diner door opened and 3 people in expensive suits walked in. They looked completely out of place in the worn-down diner with its cracked vinyl seats and faded menus. One of them was a tall black woman with kind eyes who walked straight to Kaisha and asked, "Are you Kaisha Washington?" Kaisha's heart jumped into her throat. She immediately thought something was wrong. Maybe she was in trouble. Maybe the man had died after all, and they were here to blame her. Her hands started shaking as she nodded yes. The woman smiled warmly and introduced herself as Janet Morrison and explained that she worked for Marcus Chun, the man Kaisha had saved. Marcus wanted to meet her and thank her personally. Kaisha felt relief wash over her, but also confusion. She told Janet that no thanks were necessary and that she was just glad the man was okay. But Janet insisted that Marcus would like to see her and asked if she could take a break. Kaisha looked at her boss, Mr. Miller, who was watching from behind the counter with suspicious eyes. He nodded reluctantly, and Kaisha untied her apron with nervous fingers. She followed Janet and the 2 other people outside where a black luxury car was waiting. Kaisha had never been in a car like this in her entire life. The leather seats were softer than her bed at home, and the inside smelled like expensive perfume. As they drove through the city, Kaisha looked out the window and wondered what kind of person Marcus Chun was and why he wanted to meet her so badly. The car pulled up to Detroit Medical Center and they took her to a private room on the top floor. Janet knocked gently and opened the door. Inside the room, Marcus Chun sat in a hospital bed looking pale but alive. His eyes lit up when Kaisha walked in. He tried to sit up straighter and winced in pain. "The doctor said my heart stopped for almost 3 minutes," he said in a voice that was soft but clear. "They said if you had not started CPR immediately, I would have brain damage or I would be dead. You gave me those 3 minutes. You gave me my life back." Kaisha stood there not knowing what to say. She twisted her hands together and looked down at her worn-out shoes that looked so out of place on the clean hospital floor. "I just did what anyone would do," she said quietly. But Marcus shook his head firmly. "No," he said, "most people would have walked away or waited for help. You acted. You saved me. I need to know why. Why did you help a stranger?" Kaisha looked up and met his eyes. She saw genuine curiosity there and something else. Vulnerability. This powerful man was asking her a question that came from deep in his soul. "Because life is precious," she said simply. "My mama taught me that before she died. She said every person matters, and if you have a chance to help someone, you do it. You don't ask questions. You don't think about yourself. You just help. Because that's what makes us human." The room was silent for a long moment. Marcus felt tears threatening to spill from his eyes. In his world of business deals and billion-dollar decisions, he had forgotten such simple truth. He had forgotten that humanity existed outside of profit margins and stock prices. This woman who probably had nothing had given him everything without expecting anything in return. He cleared his throat and asked Kaisha to sit down. She hesitated, but then sat in the chair next to his bed. He asked about her life, and Kaisha found herself talking about Destiny and her job at the diner and her struggles to make ends meet. She did not mean to share so much, but something about Marcus made her feel comfortable. Marcus listened to every word with complete attention. As Kaisha talked about working double shifts and walking 4 miles every day and choosing between paying rent and buying medicine for Destiny, when she got sick, he felt shame burning in his chest. He spent more money on one business lunch than this woman made in a month. He owned 5 cars, and she walked everywhere. He complained about being tired while she worked 16-hour days without complaint. When Kaisha finished talking, Marcus made a decision that would change both their lives forever. "Kaisha," he said, "I want to help you. I want to pay off your mother's medical bills. I want to buy you a car. I want to make sure Destiny has everything she needs." But Kaisha immediately shook her head. "No," she said firmly. "I did not save your life for money. I don't want your charity. I may be poor, but I have my pride." Marcus felt his respect for her grow even stronger. He understood. He had grown up poor himself before he built his empire, and he knew what pride meant to people like them. "Then let me offer you something else," Marcus said. "A job. I need someone like you in my company. Someone who sees people, not just numbers. Someone who cares. Come work for me as my community outreach director. You will help me find ways to give back to people who need it. You will make sure my company remembers that we serve humans, not just shareholders. The salary is $150,000 a year, plus benefits and college fund for Destiny. You will have real power to make real changes. This is not charity. This is me recognizing talent and character when I see it." Kaisha's mouth fell open. $150,000. She made $22,000 at the diner. This was more money than she had dreamed of in her entire life. But doubt crept in. "I don't have a college degree," she said quietly. "I only finished high school. I don't know anything about business." Marcus smiled. "You know the most important thing," he said. "You know how to care about people. The rest I can teach you. Do you want this opportunity or not?" Kaisha thought about Destiny and the life she could give her with this job. Good schools, a safe neighborhood, college savings, everything she had ever wanted for her daughter. But she also thought about what her mother and grandmother had taught her. Never take what you have not earned. Always work hard. Always be honest. She looked Marcus straight in the eye and said, "Yes, but only if you promise me something. Promise me you will fire me if I am not good at this job. Promise me you will treat me like any other employee. I don't want special treatment because I saved your life. I want to earn my place." Marcus reached out his hand and Kaisha shook it. The deal was made. As Janet drove Kaisha back to the diner, she stared out the window in shock. Her life had just changed in one conversation. Everything was different now. When she got home that night, she sat Destiny down and told her the news. Her daughter jumped up and down with joy and hugged her so tight Kaisha could barely breathe. "We're going to be okay, Mama," Destiny whispered. "We're finally going to be okay." Starting her new job was terrifying for Kaisha. She showed up on her first day at Chen Industries headquarters, wearing the only nice outfit she owned, that she had bought from a thrift store. The building was 40 stories of glass and steel and made her feel tiny. Everyone around her had college degrees and spoke in business terms she did not understand. But Marcus had assigned Janet to help her learn, and Janet was patient and kind. She taught Kaisha about budgets and proposals and company structure. More importantly, she taught Kaisha that her voice mattered. In meetings when executives talked about cutting costs, Marcus would turn to Kaisha and ask, "What do you think?" At first she was too scared to speak, but slowly she found her courage. When they wanted to close a community center to save money, Kaisha stood up and explained how that center had taught her CPR, which had saved Marcus's life. The room went silent. The community center stayed open. Kaisha began to realize that her perspective was valuable, because she had lived the life that most of these executives only read about in reports. 6 months into her job, Kaisha proposed an idea that would become her greatest achievement. She wanted to create a program called Second Chances that would hire people from difficult backgrounds and give them training and real jobs at Chen Industries. People like her who had potential but lacked opportunity. Marcus loved the idea immediately and gave her a team and a budget. Keisha worked harder than she had ever worked in her life. She visited shelters and community centers and job programs. She interviewed hundreds of people and selected 30 for the first group. She created training programs and mentorship pairs. She fought for her people when other executives doubted them. And slowly second chances began to succeed. The people she hired were grateful and loyal and hardworking. They brought new ideas and energy to the company. Other companies began to copy the program. Keisha was invited to speak at conferences and business schools. A year ago, she had been serving coffee at a diner. Now she was changing the way corporations thought about hiring and social responsibility. But success brought new challenges. Some executives resented her close relationship with Marcus. They whispered that she only had her job because she saved his life. They questioned her decisions and tried to undermine her programs. There were days when Keisha wanted to quit and go back to her simple life. But then she would think about the 30 people whose lives had changed through second chances. She would think about Destiny, who was thriving in her new school and talking about becoming not just a doctor but a surgeon. She would think about Marcus, who had taken a chance on her when no one else would have. So she kept fighting. She learned to navigate office politics while staying true to her values. She learned that changing systems from the inside was harder than she ever imagined, but also more important. Every small victory mattered. Every person she helped mattered. She was making a real difference, and that knowledge kept her going through the hard days. 2 years after that night on the sidewalk, Marcus called Keisha into his office. She had been there many times before, but today felt different. He looked serious and a little nervous. "Keisha, I need to tell you something," he said. "When you saved my life, you did more than restart my heart. You reminded me why I started this company in the first place. I had lost my way. I was chasing money and power, and I forgot about people. You brought me back to my purpose. Because of you, I have changed how I run this entire company. We now donate 10% of profits to community programs. We have hired 300 people through second chances. We have changed our supply chain to support small minority-owned businesses. Wall Street says I am crazy and that I am leaving money on the table. But our employee satisfaction is at an all-time high, and our innovation has never been better. You did this. Your example did this. So I am making you Vice President of Social Impact and giving you a seat on the board of directors. You will help guide this company's future. You will have real power to create real change." Keisha felt tears streaming down her face. Vice President. Board of Directors. These were titles she had never dreamed of. But more than the titles, she was crying because of what Marcus had said. She had changed him. She had changed his company. Her simple act of helping a stranger had created ripples that touched thousands of lives. It was almost too much to believe. But it was real. She was living proof that one person could make a difference. That kindness mattered. That doing the right thing, even when it was hard, was always worth it. She wiped her tears and smiled at Marcus. "Thank you," she said, "but you changed your own life. I just reminded you who you already were." Marcus smiled back. "Maybe we saved each other," he said. "That night outside the diner you saved my body. But in the months since then, you have saved my soul. We are even now." But their story was not over. It was just beginning. 3 months after her promotion, Keisha was walking through the lobby of Chun Industries when she saw a young homeless man being escorted out by security. He had come in asking for help, and the guards were removing him. Something about the desperation in his eyes made Keisha stop. She told security to wait, and she approached the young man. His name was Daniel, and he was a veteran who had fallen on hard times after leaving the military. He had applied for jobs everywhere, but no one would hire him because he had been living on the streets. He was hungry and tired and losing hope. Kaisha saw herself in his eyes. She remembered what it felt like to be desperate and invisible. She told Daniel to wait, and she went straight to Marcus's office. She explained the situation and asked if they could give Daniel a chance through second chances. Marcus did not hesitate. He said yes immediately. Daniel started in the mailroom, but within a year he had worked his way up to the IT department, where his military technical training finally got recognized. He became one of their best employees. The story of Daniel spread through the company and the city. Local news picked it up. Then national news. Kaisha became known as the woman who had started a movement of second chances. Other companies reached out asking how to start similar programs. Kaisha began consulting and speaking and writing about her experiences. She wrote a book called From Sidewalk to Boardroom that became a bestseller. All the money from the book went into a foundation she started to help single mothers get job training and childcare support. The foundation was named after her mother, Grace Washington. Kaisha never forgot where she came from. Even as her salary grew and her influence expanded, she stayed humble and grounded. She still lived in Detroit, though, now in a safe neighborhood. She still shopped at thrift stores, though, now by choice, not necessity. She made sure Destiny understood the value of hard work and helping others. On weekends, they volunteered together at the community center where Kaisha had learned CPR. She wanted her daughter to understand that success meant nothing if you did not use it to lift others up. 5 years after that night, Marcus and Kaisha stood together at a ceremony where Chun Industries was receiving an award for corporate social responsibility. As they accepted the award, Marcus stepped aside and let Kaisha give the speech. She stood at the podium looking out at the crowd of business leaders and reporters and felt her grandmother's spirit with her. 5 years ago, she began, I was a waitress working double shifts and walking 4 miles a day just to survive. I had no college degree and no connections and no reason to believe my life would ever change. But then something happened that taught me the most important lesson of my life. I saved a man's life without knowing who he was or what he could do for me. I helped him because it was the right thing to do. And that one act of basic human kindness started a chain reaction that changed everything. Not just for me, but for hundreds of people who have been hired through our programs. For thousands of people who have been helped by our community investments. For millions of people who have been inspired by this story to believe that they too can make a difference. Kaisha paused and looked at Marcus, who was watching her with pride in his eyes. But here is what I want you to understand, she continued. I am not special. I did not do anything extraordinary. I just did what we all should do every single day. I saw someone who needed help and I helped them. That's it. That's the whole story. The miracle is not that Marcus gave me a job or that my life changed. The miracle is that we forgot this simple truth. We forgot that we are all connected. That your struggle is my struggle. That your success is my success. That every person we pass on the street matters just as much as the CEO of a billion-dollar company. When I pressed my hands on Marcus's chest that night, I was not thinking about rewards or recognition. I was thinking, this is a human being, and human beings deserve to live. That's the message I want to leave you with today. Every day you have a choice. You can walk past people who need help, or you can stop and do something. You can hoard your success, or you can share it. You can build walls, or you can build bridges. Choose to help. Choose to care. Choose to see the humanity in every person you meet. Because you never know when that choice will change someone's life, or when it will change your own. The room erupted in applause. People stood and clapped, and many had tears in their eyes. Kaisha stepped back from the podium, and Marcus hugged her. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you for saving me in every way a person can be saved. After the ceremony, as they rode back to the office together, Marcus asked Kaisha what she wanted to do next. She smiled and said, I want to take Second Chances National. I want every major company in America to have a program like ours. I want to create 1,000,000 jobs for people who deserve a second chance. I want to change the whole system." Marcus laughed and said, "That sounds impossible." "Good," Kaisha replied. "The best things always sound impossible until someone does them." They spent the rest of the ride talking about plans and dreams and possibilities. Two people from completely different worlds who had been brought together by fate and had chosen to build something beautiful together. Their partnership had become legendary in the business world, but they never let it go to their heads. They remained focused on the work and the people they served. Years passed and Kaisha's influence continued to grow. She was appointed to government task forces on poverty and employment. She advised presidents and spoke at the United Nations. But her favorite moments were still the small ones. Meeting people who had been hired through second chances and hearing how their lives had changed. Seeing Destiny graduate from high school with honors and get accepted to Harvard Medical School with a full scholarship. Walking through her old neighborhood and being greeted by people who remembered her and were proud of what she had accomplished. Having coffee with Marcus and laughing about the old days when she was terrified to speak up in meetings. These were the moments that mattered. Not the awards or the recognition, but the real human connections and the knowledge that she had stayed true to her values. On the 10-year anniversary of the night she saved Marcus's life, they returned to the spot outside Miller's Diner where it had all happened. The diner was still there though, under new ownership. They stood on the sidewalk where Marcus had collapsed and where Kaisha had refused to let him die. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had not been there that night?" Marcus asked. Kaisha shook her head. "I don't believe in what if," she said. "I believe everything happens for a reason. I was meant to be there. You were meant to collapse right in front of me. We were meant to save each other. That's how I see it." Marcus nodded slowly. He had learned so much from this woman about faith and purpose and the power of believing in something bigger than yourself. They stood in silence for a moment, honoring the moment that had changed both their lives forever. Then Kaisha smiled and said, "Come on, we have work to do. There are people out there who need second chances, and we are going to make sure they get them." They walked back to the car together. Two people who had started as strangers on a sidewalk and had become partners in creating change. Their story had inspired millions of people around the world to believe that kindness matters, and that one person really can make a difference. The final chapter of their story is still being written. Kaisha is now 50 years old, and Marcus is 53. Second Chances has expanded to over 5,000 companies across America and has created jobs for more than 200,000 people. The Grace Washington Foundation has helped 30,000 single mothers get training and support. Destiny is now a successful surgeon who runs a free clinic in underserved communities. She tells everyone that her mother taught her the most important lesson in medicine, which is that every life has equal value. Kaisha still works at Chen Industries, though now as Chief Impact Officer. She and Marcus remain close friends and partners in their mission to prove that business can be a force for good in the world. They never forgot that night on the sidewalk. It reminds them that the most powerful force in the universe is not money or power or technology. It is the simple human choice to help another human being. It is the courage to act when action is needed. It is the faith that doing the right thing will somehow lead to something beautiful, even when you cannot see the outcome. Kaisha's story proves that you don't need a college degree or wealth or connections to change the world. You just need a good heart and the willingness to use it. You need to believe that your actions matter even when they seem small. You need to remember that every person you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about, and a small act of kindness might be exactly what they need to keep going. As Kaisha sits in her office today looking out at the Detroit skyline, she sometimes thinks about that young waitress who was so tired and scared but who stopped to help a stranger anyway. She wishes she could go back and tell that young woman that everything was going to be okay. That all the struggle and pain would lead to something more beautiful than she could imagine. That her mother's lessons about helping people would not just sustain her, but would become her superpower. But she knows that young woman would not believe her. She had to live through it to understand. She had to take that leap of faith to discover where it would lead. That's the thing about life Keisha often tells people. You can't see the path while you are walking it. You can only see it when you look back. So you have to trust. Trust that doing good will lead to good things. Trust that helping others will somehow help you. Trust that the universe rewards kindness even when the rewards are not immediate or obvious. Marcus Chun would have died on that sidewalk if Keisha Washington had not stopped to help him. But because she did, both their lives were transformed. Hundreds of thousands of other lives were transformed. A whole movement was born. All because one tired waitress chose compassion over convenience. All because she remembered what her mother taught her about the value of human life. That is the power we all have inside us. The power to change someone's world with a single choice. The power to create ripples that spread far beyond what we can see. The power to be someone's miracle. Keisha Washington was a miracle that night for Marcus Chun, and he became a miracle for her. Together they proved that miracles are not magical. They are human. They happen when we choose love over fear and action over apathy. They happen when we remember that we are all in this together and that every single person matters. That is the lesson. That is the truth. That is the story that will echo long after both of them are gone. A story of two people who saved each other and then went on to save countless others. A story that reminds us all that greatness is not measured by what you achieve for yourself, but by what you do for others. A story that proves that the poorest person in the room might be the richest in the ways that truly matter. Keisha Washington started with nothing but a good heart, and it turned out that was everything she needed. It was everything any of us need. So the next time you see someone who needs help, do not walk away. Stop and do something. Because you never know. That moment might change your life. It might change their life. It might change the world. That is what Keisha would want you to know. That is her message to anyone who hears her story. Be the person who stops. Be the person who helps. Be the person who cares. Because in the end, that is all that really matters. Not how much money you made or how famous you became, but how many lives you touched and how much love you spread. Keisha Washington touched millions of lives by touching one life that cold night outside Miller's Diner, and she did it simply by being human in a moment when humanity was needed most. That is the power we all have. The power to save someone. The power to change everything. The power to prove that love always wins.